From the iconic city of grit, passion, and intensity comes the fourth and final major on the game's biggest stage. It's the world's toughest tennis, the U.S. Open. The thrill of matches under the lights, the pressure of Super Saturday, the endurance of the August heat, and the famed New York City crowds that turn the sport's best players into rock stars. The U.S. Open has an unmistakable energy all its own. We'll look back at the amazing players, the incredible rivalries, the legendary moments, and the unbelievable stories that can only be found here.
And that's what they paid for. This is what they want.
It's New York City at its sizzling best. Loud crowds, loud nights, passion, and poise. Only at the Open. This time out, Fraulein forehand, Steffi Graf.
Steffi Graf forehand always stood out as one of the great shots in the history of tennis.
And I named her Fraulein forehand, and her forehand was just huge.
If you didn't have the control to keep the ball away from her forehand, she'd grind you down.
That sliced backhand, slice, slice, slice. It was going to make you hit the ball down around your ankle somewhere.
You know, if you talk about somebody who really was single-minded about winning, she epitomized that.
The young Steffi Graf had many assets in her favor. She was fast, she was powerful, and most of all, she was driven. Exceptionally precocious in her early teens, Steffi caught the eye of the tennis world not just as a fine, aspiring professional, but as a future champion of the highest caliber.
There's 4 or 5 players in my 30 years that you just knew was headed for the top. And Steffi Graf, in her mid-teens, you knew there was only one place she was going.
Well, Steffi Graf arrived on the scene in 1985 at the U.S. Open, and there'd been some murmuring about this talented German player, but people really didn't know much about her. It's before the internet, before cable TV. Players have spoken highly of her, but it wasn't until she came to New York and played here that people realized this was a future champion.
Right on the line.
You know, in '85, when Graf started to really make her rise, I played her at the U.S. Open, the first ever women's match that went 3 tie-break sets. It was played on the grandstand court, hot, humid. The worst conditions I ever remember at the U.S. Open. And we played for about 3 hours, and I ended up losing 7-6 in the third. You know, it was the first time she got through to a semifinals of a major. You just knew she wasn't going to be satisfied with semifinals.
It was very impressive the way she played the big points and beat Shriver in a very closely contested match, 3-setter. That impressed people because Pam had a lot of experience and Steffi was able to come through in the tight corners. Then she loses in straight sets to Martina. Most people in her position at that age, you know, as a 16-year-old in 1985, they'd feel like they'd done very well to get to the semis, but she was disgusted. She was really very unhappy about losing that match. You saw it written all over. To lose to the great Navratilova, that wasn't good enough for her. She had the mentality of a champion.
Martina won that 1985 semi, but a year later, a much improved Graf would once again reach the semifinals and once again face the mighty Navratilova.
Rivalry between Martina Navratilova and Steffi Graf was so wonderful for the tennis fan. They had very contrasting styles. Steffi was just such a magician from the backcourt. And Martina, of course, attacking. And in '86, they had, of course, one of the classic matches in the history of the U.S. Open.
The circumstances were perfect for a classic confrontation between the veteran, dominant player of the last 5 years and the great rising young star, Navratilova versus Graf. Graf comes back, takes the second in a tiebreak. They move into the third, and Navratilova is up 4-2 in the third. But Steffi battles back and wins 3 games in a row. So Martina finds herself serving at 4-5 in the third, and twice she is down match point. Good play, good anticipation from Navratilova. She holds on for 5 while they go on to a tiebreak. And it was a magnificent tiebreak from both of them, where Steffi saved a couple of match points and then got to match point for the third time herself. Martina pressured her into an error on a passing shot and went on to win it 10-8. It was a truly magnificent clash.
You know, you guys were saying it was going to be close, but this was ridiculous. I feel very, very lucky that I got through this one.
In 1988, Graf rose right to the top. She won the year's first 3 majors, including a victory over Navratilova in the final of Wimbledon, snapping Martina's 6-year hold on that title. The 19-year-old Graf arrived in New York poised to become only the 3rd woman in tennis history to earn a calendar year sweep of all 4 majors.
Well, Steffi Graf finally playing for the U.S. Open title she hasn't won. She plays Sabatini, and it's a tight match.
So they split the first 2 sets, and then before you knew it, Sabatini was up 4-1 second set with a chance break point to go up 5-1. Nearly broke the set wide open. Graf came back, closed the gap to 4-3, but lost it 6-3. Nevertheless, the fact that she'd fought back to make the second set competitive, I think really helped her, because she bolted to a 3-love lead in the 3rd set.
She was getting to balls that Sabatini was lunging for, and it's demoralizing to see your opponent moving so well, playing so well when you're so tired. Steffi won, I think, at one point, 15 of 17 points, and really her fitness, mentally but also physically, pulled her through that 3rd set.
And it was the perfect way for Steffi to end her Grand Slam season. She became the first woman since Margaret Court in 1970 to win the Grand Slam by finishing off Sabatini, and she showed a lot of coolness that day. I mean, you didn't sense that she was preoccupied with the achievement, that she was looking at this as one match, as a U.S. Open final, rather than saying, if I win this match, I'm going to win the Grand Slam, and I'm only going to become the 3rd woman in history to do so. So I thought she showed great poise.
My favorite memory of Steffi Graf, probably for a lot of people, was the '88 U.S. Open, which of course completed her Grand Slam.
On behalf of the United States Tennis Association and everyone here in this stadium, we present you with the championship trophy and crown you Grand Slam winner.
Don Budge and Steffi Graf.
The strongest memory I have is of Don Budge, who was at the trophy presentation, and Don Budge, of course, had won the Grand Slam 50 years before, so it was his golden anniversary. And I remember Steffi saying later that when he presented her the trophy, he whispered in her ear, "I knew it all the time." And she said that gave her such a sense of history and accomplishment.
When we talk about winning the Grand Slam, will Roger Federer do it? What are the Serena Williams chances? And remember, Steffi in 1988, still a teenager, not only wins the Grand Slam, all 4 majors, but wins an Olympic gold medal after that. Hard to see anyone surpassing that for a season.
It's one thing getting to the top, it's another thing to stay there. So it was only fitting that the one person standing in the way of Steffi's 1989 U.S. Open title defense was Martina Navratilova. Coming into that match, the stakes were even higher than usual for both players. Having lost to Steffi in 2 straight Wimbledon finals, having surrendered her #1 world ranking, and now having gone 2 long years without a Grand Slam singles title, the 32-year-old Navratilova was eager to regain her place at the top. As for Steffi, she'd lost to Martina all 3 times they'd played in New York. Those losses had come all in Graf's teens. But now she was 20 years old and at the height of her considerable powers.
In 1989, you have a situation now where Graf is clearly, I mean, a couple years earlier, she was in the process of taking #1 away from Martina. Now she is, without a doubt, the #1 player in the world, and she probably had the edge going in.
Good man.
But Martina played some of the best tennis I'd seen her played since '85.
Another great save.
She built a lead of 6-3, 4-2. She won the first set, went up 4-2 in the second, and actually held up 2 fingers, urging herself on, saying 2 more games. So she meant 2 more. This was not typical of Martina Navratilova to sort of get ahead of herself. So sure enough, at that moment of truth, though, Graf stepped up. She held her serve in the next game. Now Martina's serving 4-3, trying to get to 5-3. Martina tightened. She served 2 double faults in that next game, and Steffi broke her at love.
You have to start worrying that maybe she's choking.
Now she was in charge. She went on to win that set 7-5, and you knew early in the third that she now had the upper hand. Once she got a break and went up 3-1 in the third, you knew she was going to be unstoppable, and Martina sensed that she had let her opportunity slide.
You know, oddly enough, she wins that match after being down a set and a break. That's usually you would think, okay, this girl's out of here. And that's when you could see a player who's got that great championship grit and confidence and who's bold enough, really, to take her place among the top players. That's when a player like that will strike. You give her a little bit of an opening and suddenly, wham, bam, thank you, man. It's turned around and over.
Graf won the 1993 U.S. Open, But her New York story really picked up steam when she renewed her rivalry with Monica Seles several years later. Monica had been gone from tennis for more than 2 years, the result of the tragic incident where a deranged fan had stabbed her during a match in Hamburg. Monica and Steffi staged a fine 3-set U.S. Open final in 1995. And a year later, these two gritty baseliners went toe-to-toe once again in Louis Armstrong Stadium. By this time, Monica's comeback was thriving. Earlier that year, she had won the Australian Open. Graf had won the French and Wimbledon. So in large part, this final would determine who in 1996 was the world's best.
She and I had probably some of the most amazing matches of my career. Every one of them was very long, hard hit, and it was always like 6-3, 6-4 in the third set. And we both had such opposing styles, yet we both brought out, I think, the best in each other, because one thing I think she and I were huge competitors. I mean, we both wanted to win every single point.
Steffi had brought a new level of power and athleticism, speed into the women's game, but Monica came along with a different brand of power tennis because she had two-handed strokes off both sides. She respected Monica, Steffi Graf did, more than any other player, and she knew there was no one quite like Monica to bring out her best tennis.
The stabbing of Seles by a maniacal fan of Graf, it kind of elevated the rivalry that was already headed for the elite level. But it made the rivalry all that much more tense. I think as the viewer, you were more uneasy watching them play after that stabbing incident because you knew what had happened.
The 96 final between Graf and Seles was a tight match, and you just had this sense that when Monica Seles was absent, completely understandably, but something went out of her. She was just this fierce, fierce competitor on the court, brutal competitor, and you just have the feeling in her absence, it really wasn't her stroke so much as this strand of invincibility that went out. And you saw it in this match.
That match in '96 was, I think, a different match than the '95 because I just knew that I wasn't the same player in terms of being as good as when I left. So I was like, oh, I don't know if I can really win the US Open. And as a player, when you start having those thoughts, then you might as well check out.
When Steffi played Monica in the mid-90s, after Monica's return, it was really so much more than the tennis. It was so much more than forehands and backhands and fitness. It was really just such a mental affair. There was so much freight, so much baggage on both sides of the net. And a lot of times you just had the feeling Graf's steeliness, her mental edge is what got her through these matches. It really didn't have anything to do with who was serving better that day. You just had the feeling that Graf was the mentally superior player, and that was enough to win those matches.
I remember just kind of, it was eerie, knowing the history of Seles and Graf and what had happened, and there was this storm brewing towards the end of the match.
I served and played incredibly well, few unforced errors, so I think I played my best today.
Graf wins, and all of a sudden, they're standing on the trophy presentation platform, and the winds are blowing. You have this sort of biblical rainstorm, and it was just a strange afternoon.
It was raining during the presentation ceremony, but Graf looked as if she were standing in the sunshine. She was so happy.
Steffi was one of the most unassuming and most modest champions around. She just loved to compete. Through thick and thin, through hell and high water, whatever the conditions obtaining. She went through quite a few struggles there with family and things like that. But she was there to the end all the time, gave 100%. She's absolutely the model champion.
When she went on the court, she was always prepared, in shape, ready to compete 100% every single day, no excuses, didn't matter if she had an injury or if there was some personal issue. She always seemed to be able to figure it out and what she needed to do. And I always felt, no matter who Steffi was playing, for that long period when she was at the top of her game, I always felt that she was going to win. I just felt that she had this ability to dig a little deeper than her opponent.
I think Steffi, some of the most memorable emotional times was her winning majors at the U.S. Open.
Steffi Graf won 5 U.S. Open championships, making a mark with her tremendous work ethic, distinctive playing style, and keen appetite for competition. It's an impressive legacy, the kind of all-court excellence you'll see only at the Open.